Okay, let's get kicked off. I'm Jim Walker. I'm with Mosebaugh, and I'm a district resource, so I cover all the Mosebaugh locations, and I cover the tri-state locations, if you've heard of tri-state supply before. Analytics and information software solutions, the topic today. We're going to cover really four things. So Historian SE, discuss about that. Edge Gateway, and again, put factory talk in front of all these, please. Analytics Data View, and then PTC ThingWorks, and talk about what those tools are, what they do, how to deploy them, and what they're useful for. So, and show you some examples of some things. So we'll get into Historian first. So a little bit of a background before we jump into what version 8 is bringing. So Historian is your, think of it as your plant-wide data store for all of your process data. I also like to use a term of it is the single version of the truth, right? So think of a situation where you've deployed maybe some HMIs and they have their own data logs. You've deployed a historian, it has a data log. You've deployed some third-party things and they have data logs. Well, to put that all together is sometimes a challenge. To synchronize it or understand a sequence of events is even bigger challenge. So Historian is that single data store that can gather information from all of those sources, put it all in one place at one time, and put context around that. So I can also put what we call, and we'll discuss in more detail, an asset model around that data. I can also put event frames around that data. So making the data have more context, you're going to see, is going to have a dramatic impact as you try to do more with your data. So event frames and the asset framework have been a long time component of Historian, but we haven't necessarily done a good job of integrating that up the food chain, and you'll see how that's going to work for you. We also have a calculation engine built into Historian. Again, this is historical, so it's really the background on Historian, and it's been there for a long time. That could do things like totalization. If I wanted to know total, gallons of water that flowed and I have a flow meter, I could totalize it in the Historian as opposed to doing that in the process controller, doing it anywhere else, and having that data, okay? The Historian is designed for real-time data. So a lot of folks that I deal with are also asking, hey, can I do this in SQL? Can I do it in like an influx or a web-based database, storing real-time data? The challenge becomes compression and exception. So understanding how quickly you can put the data in, and more importantly, how quickly you can get the data out, become the challenges whenever you do a relational database. So if you've ever tried that, you know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? From an infrastructure standpoint, at the bottom here, this is really the hardware level, Rockwell or non-Rockwell. We have connectors to be able to connect to almost every industrial device you can think of, and lab devices or instrumentation. An interface node is right here, and that provides the connection to the physical, and it provides the push of the data up to the Historian SE server. And we'll discuss a little more about the architecture, but the interface node provides also the compression engine at that level so that you're only sending the data you need to send to the server, and it optimizes that network connection for you, okay? Once you're at the SE server or in the data store, you also have the ability to contextualize the data with event frames, doing some analytics directly if you want to, in the asset framework. You also have notifications so that, similar to an alarming system, if I wanted to be notified of some event in the process data, I could be notified of it. Out of the Historian, these are all the different connection points, and it's not even all of them, it's the most popular ones. So if I wanted to have a single version of the truth or a single pane of glass, sometimes they'll use that as the standard, and I wanted my Factory Talk View SE that has an operator trend on the screen, I wanted my CEO on his desk, and I wanted my engineering analysis of this data to all be using the same data set, I can do that. That's really what Historian's made for. It's to bring all of these to have a single version of the data, the process data, and they're all leveraging that. And these are all the different clients that we could leverage that into. Okay. Again, with that theme, the trend is the most popular object for process data, right? Everybody seems to be using a trend or a trend view to visualize the data. How you correlate that data is really important. In the case of a FactoryTalk View SE or Viewpoint, which is the web server for FactoryTalk View SE, what I can do is I could put up a process trend with data, and along with that, I could put the events that occurred, the alarms that actually occurred with the process data, all synchronized, all together. Historian Vision, we'll talk a little bit about that, is an engineering analysis tool, similar to Process Book, if you've ever used Process Book for Historian. And the data link allows you to get the data historian data into an Excel format. A lot of people enjoy analyzing their data in Excel or in a spreadsheet view, and you can do that. And the analytics and ThingWorks options are really to aggregate, start developing some machine performance, some analytics of the actual process itself. So going beyond the data, putting context around the data and understanding performance of the machinery or of the plant or of the line. That's what the analytics side is about. The architecture, as we had talked about before, we have the hardware level or your controller or DCS or instrumentation, but the physical layer, typically that is wired to the process. You have an interface node. This would be a separate PC or a virtual PC, is typically how it is deployed. And then you have the data archive and the asset framework. These are two separate servers. This is really SQL Server for asset framework. That's what's really running there. But the interface node allows a few things. So if I lose my connection to my data archive, all the data gets buffered here. It's lossless. The other thing I can do is I can take this interface node and make it redundant, so that now if this computer fails, a secondary computer, again, lossless, will pick up and begin the data store for me without losing any of the process data. I also have the ability to take the data archive and make that redundant as what we call a collective. So the point is I can build in resiliency into all of this if I need to, and if the process demands that high availability. The data collection interface nodes are no charge. So if I want to have 1, 10, 15, I can do that. It's no problem. And there's a case for each of those situations, but this is the most common way that you see it deployed. Connection to my PLC, to my interface node, and then my data archive and asset framework. Okay. Again, most of the time, in our case with Rockwell Automation, we're using FactoryTalk Live data to go get this data. And that's fully supported. That's how we're gathering that information from the controllers. So it's an optimized connection with all of the SIP security and everything else you would need if you want to deploy it that way. I'll hold there for a second. I know it's like drinking out of a fire hose. And I'm totally cognizant that lunch is next and all outings are this afternoon. So I don't want to bore you to death. Okay. Cool. So what's new in 8? You know, it's with this presentation, the things that are new in 8 aren't necessarily features. It's actually versions and version support. So the first thing that you'll see is the support where we're aligning with the latest FactoryTalk View version 13. We're also aligning with the Studio 5000 versions, Plant PAX being our DCS offering, aligning with that. Obviously, a historian is critically important in a Plant PAX deployment. And also with the services platform. So we'll see something here about the services platform too for FactoryTalk. The deployment of a historian has been historically a little bit complex. So they have dramatically simplified the setup, as you can see over here in this dialog, that it's almost a blind installation if you choose. You can press a button, install a 5,000 tag server with all components on one box if you choose to. There's reasons to do that and there's reasons not to do that, and we can talk about what they are. So the silent installs and unattended installations are available too, which really helps somebody maybe that isn't as familiar with all the deployment options. And then the licenses, so that's one other thing that changed with the version 8 product. So a lot of flexibility. So we sell the licenses in 1,000 tag counts. So if I wanted to do a 5,000 tag, I'd get 5 licenses of 1,000 each, put them all on one server and they add up to 5,000. If I wanted to do a collective, which would be a redundant server, I'd buy 10,000, put 5,000 on the primary and 5,000 on the secondary. Okay. So a lot of flexibility in that way. So again, not earth-shaking features that have changed, but more around the usability or deployment of the product side is what you'll see. Again, these are the specific versions because FactoryTalk Historian is OSI Pi. That's what it is. At the end of the day, how the data archives, so this brings us all to the latest version of OSI Pi's availability also, to be specific. The other thing that is really nice about Historian is all of these options, notification, event frames, the analysis and asset framework, are all included with Historian. So you're not trying to buy the asset framework module or the event frame module. It's all built in. It's all available to you. Yep. From a support standpoint of the OSs that we support, again, this was the update really with version 8, making sure our services platform is the latest version, so 6.3. Also looking at the server versions, the Windows 10. I know there'll be questions about Windows 11. I'm sure that'll be certified soon. And then your version of SQL Server and Excel and so on and so forth. So again, trying to keep up with everything and making sure that we're at the latest releases. So asset framework and event frames. Again, as I said earlier, these features have been available in Historian for a long time, but I'm as guilty as most of the users of Historian. I never had a need to deploy them. I never saw value to them. The reason was they didn't necessarily propagate into other products. And I think it's important to highlight in an event frame what the value proposition is. So what you're going to see on a few of these products we'll discuss here coming up is that there is an asset model that gets defined. And when we all think of assets, we probably think of different things. An asset could be a PLC. An asset to a CEO might be a plant. What we're talking about here normally is a line. So I built out a couple of different asset trees, and this one was a company called Rockwell Automation Foods. It has a baking area, it has a line 1, it has equipment in line 1, it has a proof oven in line 1. Here's a caster, so it's a mold level area in the casting department. A mold, they have 2 different molds, mold 1 and mold 2. I have a run out area, spray chamber area. So the asset model is really to give the data context. So when I have the asset model, I'm able to also gather tags that represent that line or that particular asset in the system. In this case, for a proof oven, I want to know batch ID. I want to know the temperature 1 zone temperatures. I want to know set points. I want to know the machine step. Where's it at in its cycle? So on and so forth, and I gather this information around the asset. The great thing about once I do this, and once I build this, is whenever I go to deploy another line, or if I'm replicating this throughout my plant, I just gather that and copy it, okay? Now what you're gonna see is this data is eventually gonna end up in our analytics tools. And it's gonna make it very easy for you to design reports that I've designed a report around line 1, but I wanna apply that to 2 other plants and 10 other lines, and I can take that same data set and just replicate. Makes it very easy to do that. So to be able to cross-compare assets, lines, facilities, those things, that's what we're building to. You don't have to do this in Historian. Historian is a tag-based licensing model. You can build the tags, you can analyze the tags, but having this type of an organizational methodology will pay benefits down the road. Same way with event frames. So event frames are a little bit different. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to characterize the process. Usually, I always think of event frames as time. So I have a batching process where I want to know when the batch started and when the batch ended, and I want to capture all that process data between those 2 areas. I want to have that time frame, in this case this zone, and be able to understand or quickly click on it and say, hey, show me batch number 5, or show me batch number 10, or give me a serial number and I'll go look up the serial number and I'll show you all of the data that made that product or that batch of products. So event frames are all about doing that, and I've created a few event frames here. A 5-minute where it looks back in time 5 minutes and it shows me the batches that were available, a 15-minute, an hour, a day, a month, a year, forever. What I'm allowed to do then is put these event frames into the analytics tool, and basically as a drop down, select the batch, and boom, up pops all the process data for that batch. It doesn't just have to be batch IDs. It could be alarms. It could be events that happen in your process where you want to capture that data that just happened in that event frame, in that event window. A lot of our customers are using Historian as a flight data recorder. So they're flying the plane, the Historian is sitting there capturing all the data, and when they analyze it, they're looking at what happened in the crash, right? They're looking for what was the pilot doing right before things happened, and what happened with the aircraft afterwards. That's a typical analysis. What this allows us to do is to quickly capture that data, but it also allows us to propagate this process data quickly into meaningful reports where I can now have somebody have the criteria of just the batch ID and understand I can go gather the data. And again, that could be any way you want to characterize the data. So event frames, very powerful. The event frames and the asset framework are in Historian SE. There's no cost, there's no adders, there's no additional funding needed. Okay? It's just a matter of deployment. And they've been there a while. It's just they really haven't had a good deployment strategy for us and use case. Historian Vision is a visualization tool, pretty easy with Vision, and it's really designed for engineers. It's really designed for the person who might be wanting to do an ad hoc analysis, probe the data, and they're looking for a root cause. They're trying to do a root cause analysis, or RCFA, to find out what's going on in the process. It is web-based, it's limited to 20 clients, and it only connects to Historian. So what I mean by that is the tools I'm going to show you here coming up can connect to Historian, connect to alarms and events, connect to your business system, connect to your accounting system, and bring all of that, aggregate all that data together. PyVision is designed really for the engineers to be able to analyze the Historian data. So I like to implement it, when I implement it, I like to implement it for the engineers that want that ad hoc analysis. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know I got to start with this pressure, and I want to look at these flows around this pressure. I want to put them on a chart. I want to see what's going on. Zoom in, zoom out. You're trying to find those causes or find those anomalies in your process. That's really what PyVision is about. It's powerful. It's web-based. You can save the reports. You can publish the reports. And again, you're limited to 20 users, which is usually scaled perfectly for a lot of engineering departments for what they need to do. You can also play back the process. So I can say, hey, start it, 10 minutes before this event occurred, play out the process, watch the actual process data be played back to you, pause it, stop it, rewind, whatever you want to do there. This is the predecessor to this was Process Book. So if you were a Process Book user, you'll be very familiar with this. To be honest with you, Process Book wasn't a very popular tool with the Historian sales, but I think this tool will be. Okay. Questions, comments? No? So whenever I do PyVision, I add in, basically this slide is all about adding in one more application server for PyVision. So it's a website, it's a web server, and again, we have a deployment guide for it that we can share. But it's going to add, Historian is going to become a multi-server, as it is, it should be deployed, but it's going to be a multi-server application with an additional server out there. I know it's busy, but it was a good slide when I started. I modified it a little bit from the original. But what I'm trying to show here is the PyVision software basically connects to the Historian. These two are the asset framework and Historian SE. PyVision has the ability to use event frames in the asset framework in the reports. So I could put a drop down on the box or on the screen, tell it click, select your batch, boom, click the batch, and the trend comes up for that batch and shows you exactly those key performance indicators that you built, that you wanted to see. What I'm also showing is another tool, or an analytics tool, the Analytics Data View. So Analytics Data View connects to Historian, it connects to FactoryTalk Live Data, it'll connect to your enterprise, any of the enterprise data sources, SQL, SAP, any of those, NetSource, any of those other things you have. And I'm also trying to show some familiar things, links, that's really a connection to the level 1 controls, or level 0 even. And then FactoryTalk View SE, it's doing its thing. But the point is that the Historian SE can be the repository, again, that central store for all of the process data. One version of the truth, single pane of glass, you'll hear those used all the time. That's what Historian can provide. So we like to say that the Historian is the foundation on which you build these other solutions on top of. Okay. Cool. Any questions on Historian or anything you guys want to discuss? No problem. So Edge Gateway. One of the most popular problems that I'm helping, or opportunities that I'm helping solve, is I want to have data in the cloud. I want to get data into an AWS solution. I want to get it into an influx database. I want to do MQTT to the cloud, to a cloud warehouse where I'm storing my data in a data lake. Those types of things. FactoryTalk Edge Gateway is about getting data pumped from your system to the cloud or to those remote locations at the edge. So, and at the edge of the automation or edge of the controls, and how we do that. So, ingress is about what feeds Edge Gateway data in. So again, FactoryTalk links, as you would expect. We could do it direct from devices over Ethernet IP. Any of the Kepware, so it doesn't have to be a Rockwell control system down below. It could be Siemens, it could be MOTM, it could be an Emerson, anything you wanted there from a third party. So we can identify those devices. I had somebody the other day ask me, well, isn't it really just RS links for the cloud? Yeah, it kind of is. It does a little more, but the contextualization of the data that we're talking about here. So just like we talked about the asset framework model, there's an asset framework model also in Edge Gateway, where it wants to help define what the data is tied to or how you're going to reference the data. So unit A, equipment A, unit of operation A, line B, those types of things may not be as important to us, but when the data gets into the IT group and they have those context references, that's what they're looking for. So they're looking for those, those contexts for the data. Again, from a deployment standpoint, this tool is really designed for the operations automation people to be able to deploy something that's going to put data in the cloud that usually the IT department is going to consume. So it's about getting that done efficiently and quickly. Okay? So the asset hierarchy in this context, you'll see, comes along with the data whenever it's sent to the cloud. And that's important. So the information model where I have a zone, in this case, the temperature set point, the actual temperature in the zone, the gas flow if you need it, those types of things, but put into a context that an OT person can assign the context, because we are the most familiar with it, the controls people, but the IT people to understand what that actually is when it gets there, and it's not just some number. Again, simplifies the maintenance and the updates. There's an object that can be put directly into the control logics controllers, an add-on instruction, and soon to be a UDT, that'll allow you to structure this for yourself in the controller also. And then finally, where do I send the data to? So in this case, and again, this is expanding also, but I can send it to Azure. So again, the cloud service from Microsoft. I could send it to a SQL database if I wanted to. That could be in the cloud or on-premise, local. I could send it to ThingWorx. We'll talk about what ThingWorx is. MQTT, anybody familiar with that? So MQTT was the first, when they did oil data acquisitions from remote RTUs for the oil rigs, that was the satellite communication before any cellular was available and things. MQTT is really a very mature standard. It's currently at version 3 point something. But it was designed to get that in small data packets sent to it wasn't even a cloud back then, but to a satellite and then relayed to a central location. So MQTT is a very popular solution. And then InfluxDB is a real-time database that's in the cloud. So these are all cloud services, with the exception you could deploy Microsoft SQL on-site. So typically Edge Gateway you're seeing is implemented for cloud solutions, but if I wanted to run an on-premise SQL database with this, I could also. So the suggested installation footprints, what's nice is I could put this in the control system using the scalable compute module. Rumor has it we could also run it on the extra core that is available in the Compact Logix area, controllers also, with a slim Windows 10 installation. On our VersaView industrial computers, and again with a server class or a VMware type implementation. The point is it is a Windows-based piece of software that's running in your automation system or with your automation system and sending that data to the cloud. It's not an appliance, it's not just a single module, it's an application that's executing. Okay. And again, a little bit of a visualization. So Edge Gateway with what it brings data in from, so any FactoryTalk Live data, any Rockwell automation controller, any OPC application that's available, so through Kepware connecting to almost any type of control system or instrumentation, and then direct from Ethernet IP, so a drive, some of these other intelligent sensors and devices on Ethernet IP will publish their data directly, and it can consume that as an ingress and then deliver that data, again contextualized, to all these different sources. ThingWorx or PTC will discuss about that from an analytics solution and what that is, but a lot of different destinations. Anything on Edge Gateway? Anybody have? Is anybody seeing cloud or getting cloud requests? Or we all probably are in the cloud every day, right? With Google or 365, Microsoft 365 Office, all different things. It's becoming something in the automation space that is becoming exceedingly popular. So,
just a comment on the gateway thing. More and more, our devices are becoming smarter, and you have to have a way of getting that data out. So we're defining smart objects in like a PowerFlex drive and a power monitor, and they may not be in that particular firmware version, but that's what's coming. So you don't always have to say the controller is the center of the universe for your live data source. It can be other devices that push up. An example is that we had FactoryTalk Analytics for devices. We're redeploying in this model because we can scale up bigger. In FactoryTalk Analytics devices was to help the Rockwell devices. So the strategies being transported into this. It may not be there today, but that's my point is smart devices are going to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Us and others, right? I don't care if it's an IO link sensor or they're going to tell you when I think I should change the fan on my VFD because it's got 5,000 runtime hours. It's going to tell you I'm going to hit thermal overloads soon, and I've done it 23 times in the last hour. It's
the analogy I use too. It's been a few years since the commercial was on, but it used to be a refrigerator in your kitchen, right? And the doorbell rings and there's a package there and it's a water filter, and I didn't, the husband and wife, or I didn't order this water filter. Well, the refrigerator ordered it because the water filter was bad. So it was pretty interesting commercial. But to your point, Rich, these things are published. The devices are intelligent. They're sending the data regardless if you're consuming it or not, and you're able to leverage it, to give it context and send it out. The other thing that I'll mention too is the most recent discussions I've been having are around OEMs establishing revenue streams through cloud analytics and availability to their customers. They're selling their customers the analytics data or visualization of the data for their performance. Or they're also letting their support teams be notified of issues at their customers directly. And you can see how that could also work at a plant level, but the OEMs are beginning to build machines with this capability directly in them. So these tools give you those flexibilities. Anything else? Good. So FactoryTalk Analytics Data View. And this one is, I like to say The complexity of where this can go is pretty deep. The deployment can go a lot of different ways. Think of this as either an on-premise where I have traditional servers in my plant to deploy this, or I could deploy this in a cloud. Okay, and I've worked on both. I've worked on an Azure deployment that is very, very effective. I really like that deployment, and with some of the OEMs, we're working with them on an Azure deployment so that they can actually sell access to their customers, so that their customers can log in and see their data. Again, what are we trying to solve with analytics? Usually these are above just what the process data is, but the foundation that's sitting below all of this is a historian. It's all that process data that we're trying to give context to, organization to, leverage and present to the CEOs, the COOs, the technology officers, the directors that are going to steer resources, money, investment, what they need to do. So that's what we're trying to solve with these. It isn't necessarily that I'm looking for a trend to show me a pressure that went to a certain level. It's that I'm trying to define what the efficiency of line number 1 was, how I can improve it, and why my quality has declined. Those are the types of problems we're usually trying to solve with an analytics solution. So again, we're usually managing very high volumes of information. We're integrating data from what we'll call disparate systems. So I'm trying to bring financial data out of the financial system. I'm trying to bring the planning data for maintenance. I'm trying to bring the schedule for production. I'm trying to bring the process data that I have. And I'm trying to put that together in an analytics format or an analysis format in analytics to be able to drive out the key performance indicators that my operations and executive team need to help them. And the task is probably being assigned to people in this room to help them do that. So how do we do that, and what do we need to do? The other thing we're trying to leverage is the domain expertise. The tools that we have are tools that can be configured or built around that process, but the domain expertise is here. It's in your organizations, and that's what we need to leverage. Okay. So if I look at our Factory Talk Analytics data view, they have a concept they call storyboards. A storyboard is a lot like an HMI screen. You could think of it that way. We also try to make the information self-service, and I'll show you what that looks like in the tool here in a minute. For people to be able to get a structure to the analytics presentation, but a natural question coming out of this in the case of a pie chart is, hey, I can see that my alarms, for this green piece right here, this oven or this mixer or whatever piece of or component of my process it is, has a lot of alarms. What are those alarms? What was the number 1 alarm in the oven? Well, I'll show you how you drill into that, how you find that information, and how you can self-serve if you choose to. I don't need to be, in order to use this tool, I don't need to be a data scientist, although data scientists can use the tool. I need to have that deep process and product knowledge for my process and my business in order to understand and interpret what this data is. That's really what it's about. Everything here too is mobile, so I could do this on a phone, I could do it on a tablet, I could do it on a Mac, I could do it on a PC, whatever platform you choose. Okay? Again, the product has gone through generations. Actually, the upcoming release here, but 2 things I wanted to point out here. Version 3 had the asset framework implemented from Historian, and version 3.01, which is the minor release, put in event frames. So that's why I was trying to stress that you're going to see these components, asset framework and the event frames, even more prominent in how the product, and making the products more productive more quickly if you've deployed them in that way. So my advice is, if you're doing a Historian deployment, deploy those up front for your process, because they're simple to do. You can overlay them afterwards too. It's nothing that you can't do later on. But the point is, additional functionality here with Analytics Data View, it becomes much, much easier whenever we do those things. So, okay. So whenever we're talking about Factory Talk Analytics Data View, a specific product, we're really focused in 3 areas. So these are all of the different analytics that I can do: descriptive, diagnostics, predictive, and prescriptive. The cost of implementing as I move left to right also goes up. To do a prescriptive system where I'm using machine learning, automatic control, those types of things, is a pretty expensive proposition, potentially, depending on how complex your process is. But the descriptive side of things, I typically let people know descriptive, whenever we talk about that, is really like alarms and events. So this is just saying, hey, is my line running okay? Is my motor or device running okay? And I can get those things typically if I've deployed a Factory Talk View SE, or even just done alarms and events in the controller. So those things are probably already built. They're already in your systems. The analytics allows us to leverage these things for gains in displaying overall equipment effectiveness, for displaying some really good deep data that we can leverage quickly to make a return. We're looking for returns on investment. We're looking for correlations and relationships to make our business run more efficiently at a lower cost. Okay. The analytics tool, the Factory Talk Analytics tool, can scale into all 4 of these areas. These 3 are really the ones out of the chute that are what I'll call relatively easy to get to in a very quick fashion. A little more complex as you move up the chain, but they can be done relatively quickly and simply. So a short video here. So this is actually the Analytics Data View tool. What it's going to do is it's going to go into an alarms and events. So literally what happened here to build this, and we could do it live also, but it's actually, I just have a Factory Talk View SE set up that's tied into alarms and events, and that's the source for all this data. So what you'll see here is a quick analysis. Let's see if it plays. Where I select the report, it opens up a storyboard. This would be a storyboard. In this case, it's showing me that I had 924 alarms. It's showing me these different sections. It's showing me a distribution chart of when the alarms occurred within the day. I can go over and select the different pieces of equipment, a mixer, a loader, an oven. I click on the oven. I can actually drill down. This is what we talked about, the self-serve part of this. So I can drill down into the oven. I can select that I want to filter on the alarm messages, the actual alarm text. And when I zoom in, you can see the chart change, and I touch the alarms. These are all a belt speed alarm, belt speed high. This is a belt speed low. But it's as easy as the biggest piece of the pie. If I can fix that alarm, or fix that fault that's occurring, or basically adjust my process so that it doesn't occur, I'm gaining efficiency. So it becomes very intuitive to quickly take a look at the analytics if I choose. Again, I'm zooming in a little bit to make it easier to see. I'll do the same thing on the mixer. I'm going to go down to the mixer once I grab a hold of it. There you go. Down the message, which is the alarm text. Apply. And now I can see what alarms were on the mixer. Mixer door open. Is that avoidable? I don't know. Mixer has been determined to be scrap, so they scrapped the load. Again, so on and so forth. All that was built was the existing alarm and events database was connected to. That's it. I didn't have to invest. And in fact, whenever I connect to that database, what happens is it builds those storyboards automatically. It understands that I'm connecting to alarms and events, and I'm going to build, in my case, I'm going to build Jim a storyboard that I think should be what the alarms and events are, and then I can go grab the different widgets, the different graphs, or the different data, and connect them. Pretty simple to use. Okay. The value, what I like to say is the time to value for Factory Talk Analytics Data View is extremely quick. It's leveraging the information that's already in your historian, or already in your alarms and events, or already in your process, and it's bringing it together. So when you have that data together on a dashboard or on a display, it's very easy for you to then, with your process knowledge and understanding of the process, to fix things. But until you have it correlated and together, it's very hard to see. So PTC ThingWorks, there's a single slide on PTC, but PTC, just like the data view, so that's why I put them side by side. If we, you know, and Rich is going to want to shoot me, but I'll let him talk. So data view is what I would call the really easy self-serve solution. ThingWorks can do everything data view can do and a lot more. So this is a simulation of a ThingWorks display. ThingWorks is usually built for definite purpose. So it's usually built for your business specifically. It's not as what I'll call programmable or configurable as a data view application will be. But there is, in fact, I'm working on a current very good use case for an OEM where they want to build that in PTC ThingWorks because they want a definite purpose. They have a specialized industry that they're in, a specialized set of customers that they're targeting, and the value proposition for them is very high. So they're building a PTC. They don't do the same thing. I can do almost anything in ThingWorks. Data view is a very specific subset, but it's probably 90% of the applications or 95% of the applications. Data view is a really good fit. So, Rich, anything you'd add to that? Okay, cool. And again, you'll hear a lot of different terms whenever we're doing an analytics presentation, KPIs for key performance indicators, a lot of these other things, the storyboards, you know, and usually the IT folks are in the room for the discussion. We can deliver either of these in a cloud. We can deliver either of these things as what we call on-premise or local, if you choose to do that. So, kind of summarizing. So, Historian SE is really the foundation. So, create a single process data view for the entire enterprise. I think we underestimate the criticality of that. We underestimate that my operator was looking at one chart that was updating at 5 seconds, and I'm looking at something that's updating at 30 seconds, and my data, although it may look the same sometimes, when it's critical, it probably won't. So everybody having a single version of the truth is really important. The asset framework and the event frames will become more prominent as we move on, but it's very prominent right now with the analytics tools. What we eventually get to is leveraging the process data and putting it into financial terms for the executive class people to help us achieve what we need to achieve. So understanding what that is, and that's what analytics are all about. Cloud, software as a service, and machine learning are opportunities. We can solve those today. I don't want you to think we're talking about something that's, you know, later this year or next. These tools are here today. We are seeing an enormous interest in getting these things deployed, because whenever we're talking about the analytics side, we're talking about giving you business tools to be able to analyze your process, maybe like you've never analyzed it before in real time. Because it's hard to bring all these things together, but when you have a tool that integrates them and brings context to them all at once, it makes it very simple. So again, I'm Jim Walker. You can call me, get with your salesperson, you know, have us come out and talk to you, discuss applications. Are there any questions? Anybody enjoy? Oh, yeah, yes, please.
Are you able to use FactorDoc analytics with, like, directly with SQL, or do you have to use it with Historian?
No, you could pull. You don't have to pull from Historian. You could pull direct from SQL. So native in the product is a connector direct to SQL. So, yeah, no problem.
You just purchase that FactorDoc analytics.
Lay it right over a SQL database. Yeah, usually for process data or real-time data, time series data, you'll see a historian involved in that connection. But yeah, no problem connecting to a SQL database, an influx. You know, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. A lot of different, but it won't be an issue.
And vice versa, you could use PTC ThingWorks to work directly with SQL as well.
Yes, yeah. PTC actually has a lot of different types of connectors, but definitely the most popular are in both products that we would think of. But if I have to do something custom, something completely out of the ordinary, ThingWorks would give me additional flexibility that I may not have.
For ThingWorks, is it a subscription?
It is. So it's, and ThingWorks can be delivered, again, it's very popular to deliver it as a service. So they'll host the Azure. They'll maintain the Azure for you, the application itself.
And you charge the customer, like the OEM
Mm-hmm.
will just post that, and will charge the customer.
Yeah, so like what my OEM is doing right now is they have a potential pool of 1,000 customers that would subscribe to this. And they're basically backing that up to say, okay, if I did that deployment, what would it cost? And then they're dividing by 1,000 to say, how would I separate that over the potential customer base to understand, because it's an upfront investment. And for them, their executive team, then to understand what the annuity looks like, because this doesn't stop, right? It's a subscription they're selling. So,
Is it like these things work more like a tag based, or is it just you just pay a one-time subscription fee for it?
no, it's an annual. So it's an annual subscription, yeah. And usually if you want us to help with the PTC team to help with the development, which is very common in different facets, whole development or just helping get things, they'll usually build PTC objects or things. That's how thing works. But they'll build the things and then allow you to have those connections to those things. They are not limited by tags. They're limited by the individual users. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good question because I didn't cover it in detail. The analytics tool is sold by storyboards. So when you buy the product, you get 100 storyboards and you get a developer license to build the storyboards. You can add viewers, you can add developers, and you can add 100 storyboards at a time. So, but great question.
How much how much?
I knew you would ask that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Analytics versus ThingWorks, I guess, is it?
So let me just say this. ThingWorks is usually a complex deployment that's much more expensive.
Gotcha.
Yeah, ThingWorks is definitely the lower cost solution.
Or analytics data views.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? Yeah, I'm sorry. Analytics Data View is the lower cost solution compared to ThingWorks, yeah. Yep. But really powerful, and I think from an automation standpoint, it really makes you think about things differently. And if our automation teams do the right thing and deploy a historian correctly with event frames and things, it makes it so much simpler to get to that next level. Again, it's not that you can't go back and do it. It's not that you can't roll that in later. It's just that doing it up front makes it a lot simpler.
Just the key takeaway I would kind of leave the group is you got to look at what business problems you're trying to solve, or why you're serving up the data in that way, with that context, right? So is it performance or quality are usually the two big things, but those analytic tools tie into all the other business databases that a customer has. If you have an MES system, manufacturing, so the thought is, hey, my machine is starved. Well, why is that? Is it because the operator is doing certain things, or just my raw material went shortage, or the tow motor didn't show up at the right time? So you take your schedule, how you run your plant line, process data, how it runs. So you're answering the who, what, where, when, how type of thing. But the tool is showing you, but because it's bringing the schedule and the, how you made it, when you made it, and all that stuff together. Those tools connect. So to know that those tools are designed to connect to multiple things. So that as customers go through their digital transformation, try to put more information on the glass, that's kind of the job of these people.
And Rich, you just made me think of something too that I hadn't covered. Product genealogy is a big thing also. So I make a component and I ship it, so track and trace is something that sometimes we get into with these analytics tools too. So the event frames and that all help with understanding how that proceeds, how that batch ID or serial number follows the product throughout, and being able to correlate this data quickly. Because those are some challenges that we face, and a lot of those are custom type solutions. But product genealogy is a hot one. I have a customer right now that does medical grade metal, and they have to be able to track that genealogy from the time the raw material started until the finished product shipped to the customer, and provide that for an 8-year period if they get audited. So it's really compelling information. The other thing I wanted to say too was, and Rich kind of hit on it, the quality side of things, or operating efficiencies and things. The point is to get the key performance indicators into the right hands of the person that can interpret them. It may not be as well as we can build a storyboard or a view of the data. It may never be intuitive until it's a metallurgist that's looking at that data, right? That can interpret that data really well. So that's really what it's about. Also, all of these solutions are designed for mobile natively. So they're designed to go on a phone, they're designed to be mobile on a tablet, whatever they are. They're web-based. So, you know, again, we're not dealing with some special client that you have to install or something specific that you have to do. So, cool. Yeah.
From the quality side, so you could link that in, like, if you're tracking a product all the way through, that could link in, like, ISO, like their ISO 9001.
Yeah. Potentially.
That's all important. Yeah, exactly.
Just eliminate it.
Yeah. We're gonna do the
Why take weapon software for that?
Yeah.
Oh, ISO software that you're using to do those things.
Why pay for that?
Again, I don't want to endorse that. I don't know, but there's people that do know. So it's and I do get involved or have gotten involved historically in a lot of specific process auditing, where it's a third party auditing the customer, and the third party auditor will come down and they give them the key performance indicators. And once we have those captured in the right context, that becomes such an easy procedure. The other thing that I wanted to mention with the analytics tools, I have a customer that wants to be able to, they make a product and they want to be able to calculate the energy that went into the product. They also want to be able to calculate the cost of the energy that went into the product. So we're doing some things where we're pulling the electrical bill, understanding their cost at that moment that they made the product, and doing some things that, again, bring those disparate systems that you need to have the information. You know, I can't just put in, hey, it's, you know, I don't know, 50 cents a kilowatt or $500 a kilowatt, whatever it is. I can't just put that in and expect that's going to be appropriate in 5 years, right? But I can if I'm connected to real-time sources for that data.
You'd almost need to connect with an API.
Well, what's really cool is some of these providers are now providing that through a web-hosted connection that I don't have to have an API. I can actually do a pull to a cloud-based SQL database through a secure connection, and I can query that data directly. So I have a lot of flexibility that is coming from some of our other, again, disparate systems, not necessarily directly related to the automation we're doing, but definitely correlated whenever we try to put these things together. So, thank you so much. Good luck golfing. Be safe on the river.